Hello and welcome to the Arise interview. 60 minutes of big questions about the big stories from the news and beyond, with fresh insight and critical analysis. I'm Charles Anyagulu. Coming up in the next hour, they're calling it the Pandemic Earth Day, the 50th anniversary of the birth of the worldwide environment movement. For the planet and for humans at least, the Earth is effectively closed due to COVID-19. But the coronavirus side effects, reduced pollution, re-emerging wildlife and plunging oil prices offer a tantalizing glimpse of a more environmentally friendly planet. But can there be much cheer given that the cause is a deadly disease that's ravaging the world? We'll speak to one of Nigeria's hard-working environmentalists. And later, the growing economic cost and indirect consequences of the pandemic, and a stark warning from the United Nations World Food Programme. A worldwide famine of biblical proportions could be upon countries with vulnerable populations, including those in Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia. We'll talk to one aid worker about the needs of those living in extreme poverty in Nigeria in a moment. Now, the theme for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day 2020, which is of course today, is climate action. The enormous challenge, but also the vast opportunities of action on climate change have distinguished the issue as the most pressing topic for this year's Earth Day. But now we have a new dimension to the environment, COVID-19. The world is experiencing a new relationship with the environment, enjoying a sort of new tranquility with far fewer flights, a lot less cars on the roads, wildlife returning to new clear waters, the air clearing of pollution, and the chief polluting fossil fuel, crude oil, now so worthless that the industry is paying to have it taken off its hands. It's a scenario that a few months ago environmentalists could only dream about. But given that this new green reality is the result of the coronavirus pandemic, which is ravaging the world, should we be cheering? We'll speak to a Nigerian environmentalist about this in a moment. But first, here's the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, delivering his Earth Day message.
On this International Mother Earth Day, all eyes are on the COVID-19 pandemic, the biggest test the world has faced since the Second World War. We must work together to save lives, ease suffering, and lessening the shattering economic and social consequences. The impact of the coronavirus is both immediate and dreadful. But there is another deep emergency, the planet's unfolding environmental crisis. Biodiversity is in steep decline, and climate disruption is approaching a point of no return. We must act decisively to protect our planet from both the coronavirus and the existential threat of climate disruption. The current crisis is an unprecedented wake-up call. We need to turn the recovery into a real opportunity to do things right for the future. I'm therefore proposing 6 climate-related actions to shape the recovery and the work ahead. First, as we spent huge amounts of money to recover from coronavirus, we must deliver new jobs and businesses through a clean, green transition. Second, where taxpayers' money is used to rescue businesses, it needs to be tied to achieving green jobs and sustainable growth. Third, fiscal firepower must drive a shift from the grey to the green economy and make societies and people more resilient. Fourth, public funds should be used to invest in the future, not the past, and flow to sustainable sectors and projects that help the environment and the climate. Fossil fuel subsidies must end, and polluters must start paying for their pollution. Fifth, climate risks and opportunities must be incorporated into the financial system, as well as all aspects of public policy making and infrastructure. 6. We need to work together as an international community. These 6 principles constitute an important guide to recovering better together. Greenhouse gases, just like viruses, do not respect national boundaries. On this Earth Day, please join me in demanding a healthy and resilient future for people and planet alike.
And that's the UN Secretary General there, Antonio Guterres, delivering his Earth Day message. Well, for more on the pandemic Earth Day 2020, I'm joined now in the studio, albeit at a safe social distance, by the environmentalist and development consultant Paddy Ezeala, who works with some of the most reputable international aid agencies. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Joining us. And I was going to start by asking you, we're seeing far fewer flights, a lot less driving, a lot less factories pumping out fumes. Is this a new opportunity to see what difference we can make with the environment?
Yeah, but we should also find out that, recognize that the cause of this development is an existential threat. So liquid leaves no room for people to start thinking of such opportunities. Well, it would be nice to see the waters clean, the air very clean and things like that, but not at the expense of human beings, because what we have been preaching for decades is for humans to live in harmony with nature, not nature being separate and human beings under lockdown. That is not the way to go. It's most unfortunate that we are seeing how clean nature can be. But what has brought about such development is not that people have become environmentally aware and started doing the right things, but it's not that they have been forced to go indoors. It has economic consequences, and we wouldn't like human beings to be exterminated in favor of the natural environment. That's not what we're looking for.
But how relevant would you say COVID-19 is to the environment? Because, I mean, there are lessons there, aren't there? The fact that COVID-19 is seen as a threat, people have reacted the way that they have to that threat. And people like you have been banging on for years about the threat posed to the environment, but there's been no reaction, certainly not this type of reaction.
Well, just like I normally say, when you see a situation like this, you look at the lessons to take away from it. Well, if we do the right things, we will get the environment back. The situation is not hopeless. That's what you see with the lockdown. Just a few weeks or months of lockdown, things try to get back to the way it should be. But now, it's just that that's not the kind of lesson we would like to take, the first lesson, because what that implies is that whenever we're out of this, people are going to bounce back and we are back to square one. That's not the kind of lesson we are looking for. One would have preferred a situation whereby people quite understand how to manage the environment, how to live in harmony with nature, without destroying the environment while making economic and social progress.
But of course, sometimes it takes a crisis to create an opportunity.
Yeah.
And would you say that the awareness of the environment is greater now as a result of COVID-19?
It may not be awareness. It's just that, well, awareness in one sense that we know that it is possible to get things right. And we are being forced to do things differently. For instance, many people are, even under lockdown, are working from home. In some countries, nobody would have thought of that. You know, some meetings that would have been held online, people are forced to do that. Even television interviews, people are now doing on Skype and all that. Which means if you take another look at the way we do things, there's an opportunity to reorder things, to think in a different way, and minimize the way we burn energy, the way we move around, the way we drive around, and many flights here and there and all that. The impact on environment is grave. When we discuss climate change, they say carbon emissions reduction and all that. People are now forced to reduce it. But the fear is that when we're out of this, they are going to bounce back even more.
Yes, I want to talk about that a little bit later. The fact that the threat might be greater and the environmental damage might be considerably greater. But what about the relevance of science today, for instance, which environmentalists like you have depended on to provide statistics to support your contention that the environment is being damaged? I mean, with COVID-19, has science become more central in policy making? Because you see everyone quoting the statistics and the numbers and listening, you know, actively and intently to scientists. The understanding of statistics has become core, hasn't it? That would help the understanding of the environmental damage, wouldn't it? If people were able to react to it the way they're reacting now.
Yes, the science has taken the center stage, more or less. People, as you listen to the doctors, listen to what the scientists are saying and all that. Yeah, we are listening now. Religion and others have stepped sideways. So it is something good. Science is the way to go, science and technology. I was talking about having meetings online. Without science, we'll be talking about that.
So that is, that's what I'm referring to is the stats.
Yes.
Because for instance, I mean, for you to convince me, that's the problem. A lot of people are science, if you like, unfriendly in the sense that they don't understand it really. So when you start talking about the carbon emissions and the, you know, the amount of, you know, displacement of air by particles and so on and so forth, you know, people kind of glaze over.
It is now first understanding of the importance of science. People now see it in practical terms, that without science there is no way. People are looking for the vaccines. It's not science. People are looking for finding cure here and there.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Do you, I mean, because as COVID-19 has happened, I would imagine that you're re-strategizing in terms of how to get more people, because I mean your central focus remains the environment. Do you see countries adopting a lot more remote working, reducing sort of business and leisure flights, cars on the roads from now on, and replacing them with remote working? Because that would make a huge difference to climate change, wouldn't it?
Yes, because first of all, we now know that it's possible to do that. Like where we live in Nigeria, people move around a lot. In the morning, many cars are on the road to go to work. But what they're going to the office to do, they could have as well done from home. So now we have seen the practicality, the possibility of it. So from there we can take off and now see how to practicalize that. For instance, you look at a part of Lagos that is known as Apapa, where the wharf is, the congestion that takes place there. You go there today, you wouldn't be able to see many vehicles. But you now see that most of the things people go there to do could be done online. People could clear their goods and whatever without having to go there. So we have to start looking at that. You know, it's also what science can do, what technology can bring about. We have to look in that direction without having to restructure the entire infrastructure to achieve the
With me in the studio as we mark Pandemic Earth Day 2020, the environmentalist and development consultant Paddy Ezeala, who works with some of the most reputable international aid agencies. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. We were talking there previously about flights and you know, the reduction in travel and the consequent reduction in emissions in the atmosphere. Do you think that this could turn out to be a development threat to developing nations like Nigeria? If you were, for instance, to start advocating for people to stay at home and stop driving and stop sort of going to work. I mean, because if the world were to go, or certainly if Nigeria were to go to remote working, wouldn't it threaten the case for investment in roads, rail networks, airports, that sort of thing?
People must have to move, but it depends on where you're going to. People must have to move. What has happened now is that there is need for people to stay at home and do what it is that they do in the office. Not everybody, some services. The situation whereby everybody goes to office every morning may not be fashionable, may not be environmentally friendly. There are also some corporate organizations and even institutions in Nigeria that just monthly meetings, management meetings will tell people traveling from all parts of Nigeria to wherever
they'll take flights as well as
drive. So when you can easily do that online with your Skype or whatever. So ideas, well, even the economy itself will be making people reason better these days. The cost of even flying is less than doing it.
In other words, they can save money. They can do all kinds of things as well as protect the environment.
Exactly. So it makes more sense to do that. So one can campaign in that line, in that direction.
But then conversely, given that road and air traffic isn't the only form of pollution, is it possible that emissions associated with other sections or sectors have also increased simply because more people are staying at home? So domestic gas sort of combustion, for example, wood burning, all those kinds of things. I mean, these are all sources of emissions, aren't they?
No, I don't think so. It's either this or that. If you go to work in the morning, if you have a staff canteen, they cook there. If you eat out, the burden is on the people who supply the food. If you stay at home, you cannot eat at home and also eat outside. You cannot burn the AC in your office and at the same time burn the one in your house. It's a choice between one or the other. So I don't think consumption of energy will increase at home at the expense of what you do in the office. I don't know whether, but I think
well, I mean, the point really is that oftentimes people have someone at home whilst they're at work.
Yeah.
The point is that the numbers have now increased because a lot of people are talking about the fact that they're adding weight because they're staying at home, they're eating more, they're doing so many other things, raiding the refrigerator many more times, watching television a lot more, doing all the things that potentially could be hazardous to the environment.
Well, no statistic, no calculation has been done on that. But I think we keep saying, well, what you're actually saying is that at some years from now, there will be no alternative to that.
There'll be what, sorry?
There wouldn't be any alternative to people working from wherever they are. Not everybody. Offices don't have to close. If you are working in a particular office and the service you render to the office can be done from home, I don't see any reason why you can come there to occupy space.
Right. So all told, we're all rather hoping that the impact of COVID-19 won't last more than 2 or 3 months. I mean, you were talking about this earlier, and then everything will be back to normal. I mean, I know that I can't wait to race out and go to a pub or go to a bar or go somewhere. A lot of people want to go to nightclubs. They want to get out and race their cars all over the place. I mean, so a 3-month break, that might not have much of an impact on the environment, basically.
Well, just like the report we had, the impact is already being felt minimally. It's growing. But we all have in mind that the pandemic will end someday.
Yeah, and when it does, people will return to normal.
Exactly, but I do not think it's going to be abrupt. It's gradually, the things will come back to normal. That one we know. But there are lessons to take away. People are already thinking post-pandemic, post-COVID, how is life going to be? And I don't see anybody that will hazard a guess 100% sure how it's going to be. A lot of things are unfolding. But the only thing we know is that it's not going to return 100% to what it was before. Relationships, international relations, local economy, and everything changes. Some of these changes are very deep, profound changes that will take some time for us to come out from. And I also believe that people are thinking even more deeply on how to reorder things.
But now's the time for you to get that message out, though.
Exactly. For instance, Nigeria is a monocultural economy. Look at what is happening with the oil industry. So we don't need to tell the government that diversification we've been talking about for ages. This is the right time for it. And West Africa generally, that's what we call in development radical dualism. That is where you have abundance of resources and people are still massively poor. What brought about that? So, and the poverty we are talking about is one of the greatest threats to the environment. So there is a relationship. This is time to start thinking deeply, to reorder our local economies and make sure that we are better off after this. It presents an opportunity.
Well, actually, we're going to be, the next, after you, the next chat is going to be about poverty and its impact. In the time of COVID-19. But just staying with the science of this and looking at urban air pollution quality. in agreeing with what you've been saying. I mean, there's been a dramatic impact worldwide in the reduction of car and plane travel on air quality from India to China, across Europe and Africa. The air quality has improved. You can actually feel it. I mean, you open your window and you can, you don't smell the car fumes, which you normally would. And in terms of emissions, I was just looking at some statistics from the UK. The improvements in air quality, according to the government agency that carried out that assessment, the air quality is now equivalent to what it was in the early 1900s.
Wow.
Which is remarkable, because you had very few cars at the time, you had very few sort of pollution and so on, very little pollution. And that's an extraordinary development.
I think so. One would pray for that, but not because of COVID. One would pray for people to find alternatives or even inventions to reduce the emission. As we have it today, COVID has shown us how the environment could be. It's for us humans to now decide to have an environment like that without being under lockdown.
By the way, oil prices have bounced back today. So whilst we're talking about the fact that this is very short-lived, I guess the lesson in all of this is that it's causing people to think.
Yes, it's causing people to think. It's also showing people
because traders will trade.
Exactly.
I mean, the oil business will continue, and Nigeria isn't going to wave a magic wand and oil is going to go away. I mean, they're still going to be selling their oil.
Of course.
For a long time, from now,
but
the point you're making is essentially that this has deepened the thought process.
Exactly, kind of change of strategy, investment of oil proceeds in the development of other areas, other sectors. Diversifying the economy and making sure all the sectors work. Don't put your eggs in one basket.
Right. So what's your final word then on Earth Day today?
Well,
Pandemic Earth Day.
Yes, what we usually say, think globally but act locally. It is a good thing the COVID pandemic has shown us that the environment could be clean if humans decide to make the environment clean. Let's take the lessons away while we hope to bounce back to live our normal lives. But let us also re-strategize to ensure that we keep the environment clean. We live in harmony with nature. Those who treat the environment with levity, those who don't listen to issues raised by climate change, this is time to think more deeply. This is time for governments to make more sacrifices to be able to
and also for people society. To realize that nature will fight back.
Always.
Thank you very much indeed. Paddy Ezeala, the environmentalist and development consultant.